She didn't know that touching the grimoire would change everything. She didn't know that the Alpha King was searching for her. She didn't know that her 3 years of hiding were about to come to an end. Lyra pulled her worn cloak tighter around her shoulders as she moved through the forbidden wing of the Royal Library. Midnight again. Always midnight when she did her real work, cataloguing the texts that others feared to touch. Ancient volumes bound in wolf-hide, their pages filled with prophecies and bloodline histories that made even the bravest scholars turn away. The brown dye in her hair caught the candlelight as she reached for another dusty tome. Silver. Her real hair was silver, like moonlight on water, like the wolves that had been hunted to extinction, like the heritage that would get her killed if anyone discovered the truth. 3 years she'd lived in this forgotten corner of the castle. 3 years of being invisible, of surviving on kitchen scraps left too long on counters, of sleeping between the towering shelves that held secrets no one else wanted to remember. The servants walked past her as if she were part of the furniture. Sometimes she wondered if she was becoming exactly that, just another relic gathering dust in the shadows. Her fingers traced the spine of a leather-bound manuscript. Bloodlines of the Lost Pacts. Inside were drawings of wolves that no longer existed, silver wolves with ice-blue eyes, wolves like her parents had been, before they were murdered when she was 15, before she learned that being special meant being hunted. A crash echoed through the stone corridors. Lyra froze, her hands still on the ancient text. No one came to the forbidden wing. Ever. The knowledge here was too dangerous, too volatile. Most of the court believed these books were cursed. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by the clink of armour. Multiple sets of boots against stone. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself deeper into the shadows between the shelves. The prophecies about the lunar trials, a deep voice commanded. Where would they be kept? Your Majesty, perhaps we should return in daylight, another voice suggested nervously. This section of the library is said to be... I don't have time for superstitions. The first voice cut through the air like a blade, rich, authoritative, unmistakably powerful. The blood moon ceremony is in 3 weeks. I need those prophecies now. The Alpha King. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. King Damon himself was here, in her sanctuary, seeking the very texts she'd spent years studying in secret. She could hear them moving closer, searching through sections she knew by heart. Part of her wanted to help. She could find what they needed in minutes. But helping meant being seen. Being seen meant questions. Questions meant exposure. And exposure meant death. The mating prophecies would be in the restricted vault, one of the guards said. But we'd need the keeper's key, and she's... There. The king's voice was suddenly closer, much closer. Someone's here. Lyra's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the stone wall, but there was nowhere to run. The footsteps approached her hiding spot with predatory certainty. Come out, the voice commanded, but there was something almost gentle in its tone. I mean no harm to scholars. She had 2 choices, hide and be dragged out like a criminal, or step forward and hope her disguise held. Her hand moved instinctively to her brown-dyed hair, ensuring every silver strand was hidden beneath the cheap colouring. Taking a breath that felt like swallowing glass, Lyra stepped into the candlelight. The man before her was nothing like she'd expected. She'd imagined someone older, harder, worn down by the weight of ruling. Instead, King Damon looked like he'd been carved from marble and given breath. Tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Broad shoulders beneath a midnight blue tunic. Dark hair that caught the flickering light. But it was his eyes that made her forget how to breathe. Golden. Not brown or amber, but pure gold, like molten metal. And they were looking at her as if she were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. You're the keeper of this section, he said. It wasn't a question. I catalogue the texts, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know anyone would come so late. I couldn't sleep. His gaze never left her face. Something's been pulling at me, like I needed to be here tonight. Something in her chest pulled tight at his words, an impossible recognition, like hearing a song she'd never learned but somehow knew every note. "What you seek," she said carefully. "The mating prophecies and lunar trials, they're in the vault behind the astronomy texts. But the books are dangerous. They react to touch sometimes." "React how?" Before she could answer, a leather-bound grimoire tumbled from the high shelf above them. Lyra lunged forward without thinking, trying to catch it before it hit the stone floor and scattered its ancient pages. She reached. He reached. Their hands collided on the open book. The world exploded into gold. Light raced up her arms like liquid fire. Every nerve ending sparked to life as if she'd been sleeping for years and suddenly woken. The air around them shimmered with power, and she could swear she saw golden threads spinning between their joined hands. Time stopped. His eyes went wide with shock, then something deeper. Recognition, wonder, certainty. For one impossible moment, her wolf stirred inside her chest. The wolf she'd kept buried and silent for 3 years. The wolf that knew exactly what this was. Mate. The word echoed through her mind like a bell tolling, and she saw the same realization dawn in his golden eyes. No. The word tore from her throat as she jerked her hands away from his. The grimoire clattered to the floor, its pages fluttering closed, but the damage was done. The connection had been made. She stumbled backward, shaking her head. "It's nothing. Static from the old parchments. Happens all the time." But her voice betrayed her. It shook like autumn leaves in a storm. King Damon stepped forward, and she could see her own shock reflected in his face. But where she showed panic, he showed something that looked dangerously like joy. "I've been searching for you," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "You don't understand." She backed away until her shoulders hit the stone wall. Trapped. "You don't know what I am." "I know exactly what you are." His golden eyes held hers captive. "You're everything I've been looking for." The golden thread between them hummed with power, impossible to deny. And as Alpha King Damon took another step closer, Lyra realized that 3 years of hiding in the shadows were about to come to an end, whether she was ready or not. Lyra woke before dawn, with her wolf clawing at her insides. For 3 years she'd kept that part of herself buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed. Her silver wolf had been silent since the night her parents died, accepting the cage of grief and fear she'd built around it. But now it paced restlessly beneath her skin, wanting out, wanting him. She pressed her palms against her chest, willing the sensation to stop. The golden thread from last night still hummed between her ribs, connecting her to someone 3 floors above in the royal chambers. She could feel him even from here, his presence like warm honey in her veins. This was exactly why she couldn't stay. Lyra slipped deeper into the archive's forgotten corridors, hoping distance would dull the connection. She chose the dustiest, most remote sections where even the spiders had given up weaving. But it didn't matter how far she ran. The bond followed her like her own shadow. Every instinct screamed at her to find him, to seek out those golden eyes and let herself drown in whatever this impossible feeling was. Her wolf pushed against her ribs, demanding she stop running from what they both knew was right. But right had gotten her parents killed. She buried herself in a text about lunar cycles, trying to lose herself in familiar work. The words blurred together as memories surfaced, memories she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. Her father's strong hands teaching her to read ancient scripts, her mother's silver hair shining in moonlight as she shifted beneath the stars, the pride in their eyes when Lyra's own wolf had emerged, silver and perfect and doomed. "Silver wolves are special, little star," her father had said. "We're the bridge between the human world and the wild. But some people fear what they don't understand." Fear. That was what had painted their cottage walls with blood. Fear of power they couldn't control, of bloodlines they couldn't predict, of wolves that carried magic in their very bones. Footsteps echoed through the stone corridors. Lyra's head snapped up from the manuscript. She knew those footsteps now, measured, confident, unmistakably his. King Damon was looking for her. She pressed herself against the far wall of the archives, but there was nowhere to run that wouldn't take her closer to other parts of the castle, other people who might see, might question. "I know you're here," his voice carried through the silence, gentle, patient. "I can feel you." Her breath hitched. Of course he could. The bond worked both ways. "I brought you something," he continued, his footsteps drawing closer. "I thought you might be hungry." When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday? The day before? Survival had taught her to ignore her body's needs, to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. The scent of fresh bread and honey reached her, her stomach clenched with sudden, fierce hunger. "I'm not going to hurt you," King Damon said softly. "Whatever you're afraid of, whatever you're running from, you're safe now." Safe! The word was a foreign language she'd forgotten how to speak. Lyra stepped into the candlelight, and his face brightened like sunrise. In the daylight streaming through high windows, she could see details she'd missed in the shadows, the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the genuine relief in his golden eyes when he saw her. "There you are," he said, as if finding her was the most important thing in the world. He held out a small basket wrapped in white cloth, fresh bread still warm, honey cakes that smelled like her childhood, fruit that looked like it had been picked this morning. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said when she didn't immediately take it. "So I brought a little of everything." No one had brought her food in 3 years. No one had thought about what she might like. The simple kindness of it made her throat tight. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you're mine." The words were so quiet she almost missed them. "And I take care of what's mine." Something warm and dangerous bloomed in her chest. Her wolf stretched lazily, purring with satisfaction at the possessive claim. "You don't know anything about me," she said, but her hands were already reaching for the basket. "Then tell me." He settled against the stone wall, making himself comfortable. "I have all day." "Don't you have a kingdom to run?" "The kingdom can wait." His golden eyes never left her face. "This is more important." Lyra sank to the floor across from him, the basket between them like an offering. The bread was soft and sweet, the honey cakes melted on her tongue. Real food. When was the last time she'd tasted anything this good? "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Names had power. Names could be traced. "Lyra," she said finally. It wasn't her full name, that was buried with her parents, but it was real enough. "Lyra." He said it like he was tasting something precious. "I'm Damon. I know who you are." "Do you?" He tilted his head. "Who am I to you?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. She could give the safe answer, the king, the alpha, someone far above her station. Or she could give the true answer that terrified her. "I don't know yet," she said instead. He smiled, and the warmth of it made her wolf whimper with longing. "Tell me about the books," he said, gesturing to the manuscripts surrounding them. "You know them better than anyone in the castle. How long have you been studying here?" 3 years. The words slipped out before she could stop them. 3 years alone in these archives. That must have been lonely. Lonely. She'd told herself it was safety, but he was right. It had been achingly, desperately lonely. "Loneliness is safer than the alternative," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding. And underneath it, anger that wasn't directed at her. "What hurt you?" The question was so gentle it broke something inside her chest. "I can't tell you that." "Can't? Or won't? Does it matter?" "Yes." He leaned forward, and she caught his scent. pine and leather and something wild that made her wolf sit up and take notice. Because if someone hurt you, I need to know, so I can make sure it never happens again. The protective edge in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel something she hadn't experienced in years, cherished, defended. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "You know why?" The golden thread between them pulsed with warmth, and her wolf pressed against her ribs with desperate want. This man, this powerful, dangerous man, was looking at her like she was precious, like she was worth protecting. It was everything she dreamed of and everything she feared most. "The bond," she said. "It's just magic. It doesn't mean anything real." "Doesn't it?" He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation. "Touch me again. Tell me it's just magic." Lyra stared at his outstretched hand. She knew what would happen if she took it. The golden fire would race through her veins again. Her wolf would sing with recognition, and she would be lost completely. "I can't," she breathed. "Why?" "Because once I do, I won't be able to let go." His smile was soft and devastating. "Good. Neither will I." The space between them crackled with possibility. Her hand moved toward his almost without her permission, drawn by forces beyond her control. Their fingertips touched. Lightning. Pure golden lightning that made her gasp and arch toward him. The bond snapped taut between them, stronger than before, and she could feel everything he was feeling. The wonder, the joy, the fierce protective love that was already taking root in his chest. And underneath it all, the certainty that shook her to her core. He wasn't going to reject her. He wasn't going to run when he learned what she was. He was going to fight for her. "Lyra." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I've been looking for you my whole life." She jerked her hand back, the loss of contact like a physical pain. "You don't understand what you're saying," she said, scrambling to her feet. "You don't know what I am. If you did." "If I did, nothing would change." He stood too, moving with fluid grace. "Whatever secret you're keeping, whatever you're so afraid of, it doesn't matter to me." "It should." The words came out sharper than she intended. "It should matter to everyone." "But it doesn't matter to me." He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You could be anything, anyone, and it wouldn't change what I feel when I look at you." "You barely know me." "I know enough." His golden eyes held hers captive. "I know you're brilliant. I know you're brave enough to live alone for 3 years rather than risk exposing yourself to danger. I know you're kind, because you were going to help me find those prophecies even when you were terrified." Every word hit her like an arrow to the chest. He saw her. Not just the disguise, not just the surface. He saw who she really was underneath. "I know you're my mate," he said quietly, "and I know you feel it too." The truth hung between them, like a bridge she was terrified to cross, because once she stepped onto it, there would be no going back, and bridges in her experience had a tendency to burn. "I need time," she whispered. "How much time?" "I don't know." He nodded, and she could see the effort it took him to step back, to give her space when every line of his body screamed that he wanted to pull her closer. "I'll wait," he said simply, "however long you need." The promise wrapped around her like armour and chains all at once, because she believed him, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. The days that followed were a whirlwind of small, impossible moments. Lyra found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps in corridors she'd never dared to walk. And somehow, impossibly, Damon always seemed to know exactly where to find her. He brought her meals she didn't have to steal, books from his personal library that made her eyes light up with wonder. A simple blue dress that fit perfectly and made her feel almost human again. "Where did you get this?" she asked, holding up the soft fabric. It was the most beautiful thing she'd owned in years. "I had it made," he said, like commissioning dresses for library keepers was the most natural thing in the world. "The seamstress said blue would bring out your eyes." Her eyes. When was the last time anyone had noticed the colour of her eyes? She wore the dress the next evening when he found her in the astronomy section, surrounded by star charts and lunar calculations. The fabric whispered against her skin like a secret as she moved. "Working late again?" he asked, settling beside her on the stone bench. "The eclipse patterns are fascinating," she said, pointing to a detailed diagram. "The way the moon's shadow affects magical bonds during celestial events. According to this text, certain connections become stronger during blood moons." "Like mate bonds?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she could feel the intensity beneath it. "Theoretically." Her finger traced the illustration of wolves howling at a crimson moon. "Though most of these accounts are legend. No one's documented it in modern times." "Maybe because the right people haven't been watching." She looked up to find him studying her with those golden eyes, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber around his pupils, close enough that the bond between them hummed with warmth. "Damon," she whispered, and his name felt like coming home. He leaned closer, his hand moving to cup her face. "Say it again." "Damon." The word was softer this time, almost a prayer. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she melted into the touch like she was starved for it, which she was. 3 years without gentle contact, 3 years of making herself invisible, and here was this man looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "Lyra." Her name on his lips was reverent. "I want to kiss you." Her breath caught. The golden thread between them pulled taut with want, and her wolf pressed against her ribs with desperate approval. "We shouldn't," she whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. "Why not?" Because once she kissed him she'd be lost. Because she was already falling for him, and that made her weak. Because people she loved died, and she couldn't bear to put another target on his back. But his golden eyes were so warm, so patient, and when his thumb brushed across her lower lip, she forgot every reason why this was dangerous. "Lyra," he breathed, and she could feel his control hanging by a thread. She was reaching for him, lips parting in invitation, when the great hall's bells began to toll. Announcement bells, formal arrivals. They sprang apart as if burned, the spell broken by harsh bronze clanging. Damon's jaw tightened as he listened to the pattern of strikes. "Visiting delegation," he said grimly. "I wasn't expecting anyone." A cold feeling settled in Lyra's stomach. Unexpected visitors meant uncertainty. Uncertainty meant danger. "I should go," she said, already gathering the star charts. "No." His hand caught hers. "Stay. Whatever this is, it doesn't change anything between us." But Lyra was already pulling away, some primal instinct screaming that she needed to hide. The bond between them thrummed with his reluctance to let her go. "I'll find you later," he promised, as she disappeared into the shadows between the shelves. The great hall blazed with torchlight when the delegation arrived. Lyra watched from the servants' gallery, hidden behind stone pillars where she could see without being seen. A habit that had kept her alive for 3 years. The visiting party wore the deep green and silver of the Northern Territories. Wealthy pack, politically powerful, known for their traditional views on bloodline purity. Lyra's skin crawled just watching them enter. And then she saw him, Marcus. The blood drained from her face so fast she gripped the stone railing to keep from falling. 3 years. 3 years she'd convinced herself he'd forgotten about her, that the rejection had been final. But there he was, tall and cruel and devastatingly handsome. His dark hair swept back from sharp features. The man who'd claimed to love her until he learned what she was. The man who'd called her an abomination before walking away. "Alpha Marcus of the Northern Territories," the herald announced, "seeking audience regarding the upcoming blood moon ceremony and potential alliance opportunities." Alliance opportunities. Lyra's stomach turned. Marcus was here for political gain, probably hoping to secure a beneficial marriage contract. The thought of him touching anyone the way he'd once touched her made her skin crawl. Damon rose from his throne, every inch the powerful king. But Lyra could feel his confusion through their bond. He hadn't invited this delegation. "Alpha Marcus," Damon said formally. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Marcus stepped forward with predatory confidence. "Your Majesty, I come bearing news that may be of interest. We've heard rumours that you're still seeking a Luna for the ceremony." "My mating status is hardly a matter for public speculation." "Of course not. But if you were still looking, I wanted to offer my services. You see, I have some experience tracking down special bloodlines, rare wolves that might serve your purposes." The way he said special made Lyra's blood turn to ice. He was hunting, still hunting wolves like her. "I appreciate the offer," Damon said coolly, "but I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs." Marcus smiled, and Lyra remembered exactly how dangerous that smile could be. "Naturally, though I should warn you, some bloodlines are more trouble than they're worth. Silver wolves, for instance, unstable, prone to madness. The old texts call them cursed for a reason." Cursed. The word hit Lyra like a physical blow. 3 years of telling herself she was healing, that she was worth something, and here was Marcus reducing her to that single ugly word again. "The old texts say many things," Damon replied evenly. "Most of them prove to be superstition." "Perhaps, but I've seen what silver wolves can do when they lose control, the destruction they're capable of." Marcus's eyes swept the hall with calculating coldness. "If one were to surface in your territory, I'd be happy to assist in handling the situation." Handling, like she was a problem to be solved, a threat to be eliminated. Through their bond, Lyra felt Damon's anger spike. He didn't know why Marcus's words affected him so strongly, but he could feel her terror through their connection like a blade to his chest. "I think," Damon said with deadly calm, "this conversation has run its course." But Marcus wasn't finished. "Of course, Your Majesty, though if you do encounter any silver wolves, you'll want to be careful. They're clever at hiding what they are. Hair dye, for instance. Simple tricks to blend in among normal wolves." Lyra's world tilted. He knew, somehow, impossibly, Marcus knew she was here. Their eyes met across the great hall, and his smile turned vicious. A promise and a threat all wrapped up in familiar cruelty. She ran, down corridors and upstairs, through passages that had kept her hidden for 3 years. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might burst. The blue dress that had made her feel precious now felt like a beacon, marking her as someone who mattered, someone who could be hurt. She made it to the forgotten tower before her legs gave out, an abandoned room where no one ever came, where she could disappear again if she had to. Her hands shook as she pulled a travelling pack from its hiding place behind loose stones. 3 years. She let herself believe 3 years was enough, that she could have something good, something real, even if it was just stolen moments in shadowy libraries. But Marcus was here, and he knew what she was, and that meant running. Again. Always running. She was folding her few belongings when footsteps echoed up the tower stairs, heavy, familiar. Not Damon's measured confidence, but something more predatory. Marcus appeared in the doorway like a nightmare given flesh. "Hello, little silver wolf," he said, his voice soft and terrible. "Did you miss me?" Lyra pressed herself against the stone wall, her travelling pack clutched to her chest like armour. Marcus filled the doorway with predatory satisfaction, blocking her only escape route. 3 years, he said, stepping into the abandoned room. 3 years I've been tracking whispers and rumours, silver hair seen in moonlight, a keeper who knew too much about bloodline magic. And here you are, exactly where I thought you'd be. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but her voice shook with terror. Marcus laughed, cold and cruel. "Still lying, I see, though I have to admit the hair dye was clever, almost had me fooled when I first saw you in the hall tonight." He moved closer, and she could smell the familiar scent that had once meant safety. Now it made her stomach turn. You can't hide what you are forever, Lyra. I can sense your wolf even beneath all that fear. Silver power calls to silver power. You rejected me, she said, finding her voice. You called me cursed and walked away. What do you want? What I've always wanted. His smile was razor sharp. You. Just on my terms this time. Marcus pulled a scroll from his jacket, unrolling it with deliberate slowness. Northern Pack law. A rejected mate can reclaim their bond within 5 years if circumstances change. I'm here to collect what's mine. I'm not yours. The words came out stronger than she felt. No? Then whose are you? His eyes glittered with malice. Don't tell me you've been foolish enough to form an attachment to someone else, someone who doesn't know what you really are. The golden thread in her chest pulsed with warmth, and Marcus's expression darkened. You have, haven't you? Poor thing. Does he know he's mated to a monster? I'm not a monster. Tell that to the pack you burned 3 summers ago when you lost control. The memory hit her like a physical blow. The night after her parents' funeral, when grief and rage had overwhelmed her. When her silver wolf had emerged in a blaze of supernatural fire that left half a forest in ashes. It had been an accident, but the destruction was real. That wasn't. I didn't mean for that to happen. Intent doesn't matter. Power like yours always destroys everything around it eventually. Marcus circled her like a predator scenting weakness. But I can control you now. I've learned things in the years we've been apart, ways to bind a silver wolf's power, ways to make you useful instead of dangerous. I won't go with you. You will, because if you don't, I'll tell everyone in that hall exactly what the king's been harbouring, a silver wolf, a creature of destruction masquerading as a scholar. His voice dropped to a whisper. How do you think your precious alpha will react when he learns his mate is capable of burning his entire kingdom to ash? The words cut deeper than any blade, because part of her had always wondered the same thing. Part of her had always feared that Damon would look at her with horror when he learned the truth. You're wrong, she said, but doubt crept into her voice. Am I? Shall we test that theory? Before she could react, Marcus grabbed her wrist and began dragging her toward the stairs. Come along, little wolf. Time to introduce you properly to your king. No. She fought against his grip, but he was stronger, his fingers like iron around her bones. They were halfway down the spiral staircase when golden light blazed around them. Damon stood at the bottom of the tower, power radiating from every line of his body. His eyes had gone pure molten gold, and the air around him shimmered with barely contained rage. Let her go. The command rolled through the stone corridor with supernatural force. Marcus's hand loosened involuntarily before he caught himself. Your Majesty, Marcus said smoothly, not releasing his grip. I was just escorting my mate back to the hall. We have much to discuss. Your mate? Damon's voice was deadly quiet. A legal bond under Northern Pack law. I have the documentation. I don't care about your documentation. Damon took a step up the stairs, and the temperature in the tower seemed to drop. I said let her go. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, there are things about dear Lyra that you don't understand, things that make her my responsibility. Such as, Marcus's smile was vicious, she's a silver wolf, the last of a bloodline so dangerous they were hunted to near extinction, and she's been hiding in your castle for 3 years, lying to everyone about what she really is. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Lyra watched Damon's face, waiting for the moment recognition would turn to revulsion, waiting for him to realize exactly what kind of creature he'd been protecting. But his golden eyes never left hers, never wavered, never showed anything but fierce, protective love. I know what she is, Damon said quietly. Marcus faltered. Impossible! She's been disguising herself. I've known since the night I met her. Damon's voice carried absolute certainty. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own mate's true nature? You can't possibly understand the danger. The only danger I see, Damon interrupted, his power building until the stones trembled, "is a rejected mate trying to claim what was never his in the first place." He took another step up the stairs. "Lyra chose to leave you. That makes your bond void." "Not under Northern law." "We're not in the Northern Territories." Damon's smile was sharp as a blade. "And I am the Alpha King. My law supersedes yours." Marcus's grip tightened until Lyra gasped with pain. "You don't know what she's capable of, the destruction she can cause. I'm trying to save your kingdom from—" "From what? From the most powerful Luna we've had in centuries?" Damon's eyes blazed. "Silver wolves aren't cursed." "You ignorant fool, they're blessed, chosen by the moon goddess herself to bridge the gap between human and wild magic." "That's impossible. The texts clearly state—" "The texts were written by men who feared what they couldn't control." Damon reached the step just below them, close enough now that his warmth washed over Lyra's skin. "But I'm not afraid of power, especially when it comes wrapped in courage and kindness and brilliant, beautiful stubbornness." His golden eyes found hers again. "I'm not afraid of you, Lyra. I never have been." The words broke something open in her chest. 3 years of believing she was too dangerous to love. 3 years of hiding what she was because she thought it made her a monster. But Damon looked at her like she hung the moon. "You're perfect," he said softly, "exactly as you are." Marcus snarled with frustration. "She burned down half a forest. She's unstable, unpredictable." She was grieving. Damon's voice went deadly calm. She was 15 years old and alone and terrified, and her power responded to her pain. That doesn't make her evil. It makes her someone who needed protection instead of abandonment. The condemnation in those words made Marcus flinch. "She's mine," Marcus insisted, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "She was never yours." Damon held out his hand to Lyra. "She belongs to herself, and if she chooses to belong to me as well, then I'll count myself the luckiest bastard alive." Lyra stared at his outstretched hand, at the promise in his golden eyes, at the absolute certainty that he knew exactly what she was and loved her anyway. "Choose, Lyra," Damon said gently. "Him or me, the past or the future. I won't force you either way." Marcus's grip tightened in warning. "If you choose him, I'll tell the entire court what you are. They'll hunt you down like the animal you are." Let them try. Damon's power filled the corridor until the very air hummed with it. "I'd like to see them get past me." The choice crystallized in that moment. Fear or love, hiding or acceptance. A man who saw her as a weapon to be controlled, or a man who saw her as a gift to be cherished. Lyra looked Marcus in the eye and smiled. "Go to hell." Then she shifted. Silver light exploded through the tower as her wolf burst free for the first time in 3 years. Magnificent and terrible, with moonlight fur and ice-blue eyes that held the power of storms. Marcus stumbled backward with a cry of shock, his grip breaking as supernatural energy crackled around them. When the light faded, Lyra stood human again, naked and glorious and absolutely unafraid. Damon was beside her in an instant, wrapping her in his cloak, his hands gentle on her face. "There's my wolf," he whispered, and kissed her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. The golden thread between them blazed with joy. The great hall had never held so many alphas at once. Word of the confrontation had spread through the castle like wildfire. By the time Damon escorted Lyra into the ceremonial chamber, every pack leader within travelling distance had gathered to witness what would happen next. The blood moon hung heavy in the sky, visible through the massive stained glass windows. Crimson light bathed the assembled wolves in shades of power and prophecy. Lyra walked beside Damon with her head held high, her silver hair flowing free for the first time in 3 years. The simple blue dress had been replaced with a gown of midnight silk that made her look like starlight given form. She could feel every eye in the hall tracking her movement, could hear the whispered rumours following in her wake. Silver Wolf, the last of her kind. Blessed or cursed, depending on who was speaking. At the far end of the hall, Marcus stood with his northern delegation, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Royal guards flanked him, a polite but unmistakable reminder that he was no longer welcome as an honoured guest. "People of the realm," Damon's voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "Tonight, under the blood moon, I claim my Luna." A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. This was what they'd all come to see, the moment when the Alpha King chose his mate before all of Pack Society. "I choose Lyra of the Silver Moon," he continued, and her heart stopped at the name he gave her. Not Lyra the library keeper, not Lyra the hidden, Lyra of the Silver Moon, as if her heritage was something to be celebrated rather than concealed. "Your Majesty!" Alpha Reginald of the Eastern Territories stepped forward, his voice carefully respectful. "Are you certain? The silver bloodline carries complications." "Complications?" Damon's golden eyes swept the assembly with dangerous calm. "Or power that makes lesser alphas uncomfortable?" Murmurs swept through the hall, some fearful, some awed, but all acknowledging the truth in his words. "The old prophecies speak of a silver wolf Luna," said Alpha Elena of the coastal packs, her voice cutting through the whispers. "One who would unite the packs and usher in a new age of prosperity, if the legends are true. They are true." The voice that spoke was ancient, creaky with age. Elder Morrigan stepped forward from the shadows, her blind eyes somehow finding Lyra across the crowded hall. The oldest living wolf in the kingdom, keeper of traditions that stretched back centuries. "I have lived long enough to remember the silver wolves in their glory," Elder Morrigan continued, her words carrying absolute authority. "They were not cursed, they were chosen, blessed by the moon goddess to serve as bridges between the human world and the ancient magic." Marcus snarled from his position near the throne. "She burned down half a forest. You call that blessed?" "I call that grief." Elder Morrigan's voice was sharp as winter wind. "A 15-year-old child, orphaned and alone, overwhelmed by powers she'd never been taught to control. What did you do to help her, Marcus of the North? What comfort did you offer?" Silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Everyone in the hall knew the answer. "You abandoned her," Elder Morrigan said when Marcus couldn't reply. "You turned your back on a grieving child and called her cursed for your own cowardice." The condemnation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Around the hall, other alphas were nodding, their expressions shifting from suspicion to understanding. "But this is not a trial of the past," Elder Morrigan continued. "This is a claiming ceremony. Alpha King Damon, do you understand what you're choosing? A silver wolf Luna will change everything. The old ways, the old fears, they'll all have to fall away." "Good," Damon said simply. "It's time." He turned to face Lyra, and the love in his golden eyes made her breath catch. "The choice is still yours," he said softly. "I meant what I said in the tower. I won't force this bond even now." Lyra looked out at the assembled alphas. Some watched her with fear, others with curiosity, still others with something that might have been hope. These were the wolves who would follow her if she accepted, the packs she would help lead and protect. For 3 years she'd believed her power made her dangerous, but standing here in the blood moon's light, feeling the ancient magic humming through her veins, she finally understood what Elder Morrigan meant. She wasn't cursed. She was chosen. "I accept," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I choose you, Damon. I choose all of you." The words had barely left her lips when Marcus moved. "No!" He shifted mid-stride, his brown wolf launching toward the dais with claws extended and fangs bared. "She's mine. She's always been mine." Damon was moving even before Marcus completed his transformation, his own massive black wolf intercepting the attack. They collided in a tangle of snarls and snapping teeth, rolling across the marble floor in a blur of violence, But Lyra was done being fought over, done being treated like property to be claimed. Silver light erupted from her skin as her wolf burst free, more magnificent than it had been in the tower. Under the blood moon's influence, her power blazed like captured starlight. Ice-blue eyes that held the wisdom of storms, fur that shimmered with supernatural energy. She didn't attack Marcus, she surrounded him. Silver fire danced through the air, forming a cage of pure lunar magic that held the brown wolf motionless, not harming him, but making it impossible for him to move, to fight, to do anything but stare in shock at the power he tried to claim as his own. "Enough," Lyra spoke, her voice carrying both human and wolf authority. "This ends now." The silver fire tightened around Marcus until he shifted back to human form, trapped within the glowing prison. His face was white with terror as he finally understood exactly what he'd tried to cage all those years ago. "I was never yours," Lyra continued, her wolf form radiating calm certainty. "I was never anyone's to claim or control or own. I belong to myself first, and I choose to share that belonging with someone who sees my power as a gift, not a burden." She turned to where Damon had shifted back to human form, his golden eyes blazing with pride and love and awe. "I choose you," she said again, and shifted back to her human shape. The silver fire around Marcus dissipated, leaving him free but defeated. He looked around the hall at faces that showed no sympathy, no support for his cause. Even his own northern delegates had stepped away from him. "This isn't over," he snarled, but the threat rang hollow. "Yes," Elder Morrigan said quietly, "it is." Guards moved to escort Marcus from the hall, and Lyra felt a weight she'd carried for 3 years finally lift from her shoulders. He couldn't hurt her anymore, couldn't use her past against her. She was free. Damon approached slowly, reverently, as if she were something sacred. In his hands he carried a circlet of silver and moonstone that had been crafted for lunar ceremonies since time immemorial. "Lyra of the Silver Moon," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you stand as my Luna? Will you help me lead our people into a new age?" "Yes," she breathed, and knelt as tradition demanded. But instead of simply placing the circlet on her head, Damon knelt as well, equal to equal, partner to partner. "The blood moon bears witness," Elder Morrigan intoned, as Damon placed the lunar crown on Lyra's silver hair. "Let the bond be sealed." Damon's teeth found the curve of her neck, marking her as his mate for all the world to see. The claiming bite sent silver fire racing through her veins, and she marked him in return, her own teeth breaking the skin of his throat. The double marks blazed with golden light, visible even through their clothes. The mate bond, complete and unbreakable, acknowledged before Pack Society and blessed by the blood moon itself. Around them, the assembled alphas howled their approval. The sound echoed off the stone walls like thunder, like celebration, like the dawn of something entirely new. When Damon pulled back, his eyes were molten gold with satisfaction and love. "My Luna," he whispered against her lips. "My Alpha," she replied, and kissed him under the crimson moon while their people cheered their union. The age of the silver wolf Luna had begun. Lyra woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd never imagined sleeping behind. The lunar chambers. Her chambers now, she corrected herself, still marvelling at the thought. Silk curtains the colour of moonbeams, furniture carved from ancient oak, and everywhere the scent of the man beside her, pine and leather and home. Damon's arm tightened around her waist as she stirred, pulling her closer against his chest. The claiming marks on their necks had healed overnight, leaving matching silver scars that caught the morning light like jewellery. "Good morning, Luna," he murmured against her hair, and the title still sent shivers down her spine. "Good morning, my king." 3 weeks had passed since the blood moon ceremony. 3 weeks of learning what it meant to be loved openly, completely, without reservation. 3 weeks of discovering that power shared was not power diminished, but power multiplied. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Wolves from every territory had come to swear allegiance to their new Luna, bringing gifts and pledges of loyalty. But more than that, they'd brought hope. Hope for a future where bloodline didn't determine worth, where fear didn't dictate policy. "The Eastern delegation arrives today," Damon said, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "Alpha Reginald wants to discuss expanding the healing sanctuaries." "And the coastal packs want to establish new trading routes," Lyra added. "Eleanor thinks silver wolf magic could protect their ships during storm season." It was still strange, having her heritage be something that inspired awe rather than terror. The old texts she'd hidden from for so long were now studied openly, their secrets shared with scholars and healers who could put ancient wisdom to new use. The forbidden wing of the library had become Lyra's official domain, no longer a place of exile, but a centre of learning where wolves from every pack came to research their histories and strengthen their connections to the old magic. "What are you thinking about?" Damon asked, recognizing the distant look in her eyes. "The prophecy Elder Morrigan mentioned about silver wolves uniting the packs." Lyra turned in his arms, tracing the strong line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real." "It's real." He caught her hand and pressed it flat against his chest, over his heart. "Feel that? It beats for you. Only you." The golden thread between them hummed with contentment, stronger now than ever before. The mate bond had deepened into something unbreakable, a connection that transcended the physical and touched something eternal. A soft knock interrupted the moment. "Your Majesties? Alpha Elena has arrived with the morning delegation." "We'll be down shortly," Damon called, but made no move to release Lyra from his arms. "You have a kingdom to run," she reminded him, though she wasn't eager to leave the warm cocoon of their bed either. "The kingdom can wait 5 more minutes." His golden eyes grew serious. "I want to savour this, these quiet moments when it's just us." She understood what he meant. Their days were full now, meetings with pack leaders, policy decisions, ceremony after ceremony, welcoming new alliances. The Lunar Crown came with responsibilities she'd never imagined, duties that stretched far beyond anything she'd experienced in her years of hiding. But she wasn't facing them alone. "Come on," she said finally, pressing a kiss to his lips before reluctantly pulling away. "Our people are waiting." Our people. The words still felt like magic on her tongue. They dressed with practiced efficiency, Damon in formal council robes, while Lyra chose a gown of silver and blue that made her look every inch the Luna she'd become. The transformation wasn't just in her clothes, her entire bearing had changed. Confidence had replaced cowering. Purpose had replaced panic. She was no longer hiding from what she was. She was embracing it. The great hall buzzed with activity when they descended for the morning court session. Representatives from 6 different packs had arrived overnight, each seeking audience with the new Luna about matters both practical and mystical. Alpha Elena of the coastal packs presented maps showing proposed shipping routes that could benefit from silver wolf weather magic. The mountain territories wanted to discuss establishing a new healing centre where lunar blessed herbs could be cultivated. Even the desert clans, traditional isolationists, had sent envoys to explore potential alliances. "Your Majesty," Alpha Thomas of the Riverlands stepped forward during a break between meetings. "My daughter has shown signs of unusual power. Nothing like the silver bloodline, but different. We were hoping the Luna might examine her, help us understand what she's becoming." Lyra felt a familiar tug in her chest, the same instinct that had led her to catalogue dangerous texts for so many years. The need to understand, to help, to ensure no child grew up feeling like a monster simply for being different. "Bring her to court," she said warmly. "I'd be honoured to meet her." The afternoon brought a stream of similar requests. Parents seeking guidance for gifted children, healers wanting to understand how lunar magic worked, scholars hoping to access the restricted texts that were finally being shared freely. "You're remarkable," Damon murmured during a quiet moment between audiences. They stood together on the throne dais, and she could feel his pride and admiration through their bond. "Look how naturally you've taken to this." "It doesn't feel natural," she admitted, "but it feels right." "That's what natural means for us, I think. Not easy, but right." The words resonated with truth. Nothing about their path had been simple, not the bond that had formed in an instant, not the challenges that had tested them, not the responsibilities that now shaped their days, but it was right in a way that transcended logic. As the formal court session ended and the great hall began to empty, Lyra found herself drawn back to the library. Her library now, officially, but in many ways it had always been hers. She walked through corridors that no longer felt like hiding places, but like pathways to knowledge. The forbidden wing hummed with activity, young wolves learning to read ancient scripts, healers studying lunar herb cultivation, historians documenting bloodlines that had been lost for generations. Lunar Lyra? A young woman with nervous eyes approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I found something strange in one of the genealogy texts, a reference to other silver bloodlines that might have survived." Lyra's breath caught. Other silver wolves. The possibility sent excitement racing through her veins. "Show me," she said, and spent the next hour poring over ancient records with the enthusiasm of the scholar she'd always been at heart. This was her life now. Not just the ceremonies and the crown and the formal duties, but this, the pursuit of knowledge, the desire to help others understand their own power, the dream of rebuilding what had been lost. When Damon found her later, she was surrounded by genealogy charts and bloodline maps, her silver hair spilling over pages of careful research. "Any luck?" he asked, settling beside her on the floor with casual disregard for his royal robes. "Maybe." She showed him the references they'd uncovered. 3 possible family lines that might have produced silver wolf descendants. If we could find them, if they're still alive. "You wouldn't be the last anymore." "I might not be alone." The words came out as a whisper, heavy with hope she barely dared to feel. Damon reached over and tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "You're not alone now. You never will be again." "I know." She leaned into his touch. "But this could change everything. Imagine a world where silver wolves aren't legends or monsters, but simply part of the natural order again." "We'll find them," he promised. "However long it takes, wherever we have to look, we'll bring the silver wolves home." The certainty in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. This man who had seen her at her most frightened and vulnerable, who had loved her through revelation and claiming and the overwhelming responsibility of leadership, he was promising to help her rebuild something that had been lost for generations. "I love you," she said, because the words could never be said too often. "I love you too." He kissed her softly, tasting like promises and forever. My Luna, my mate, my perfect, impossible silver wolf. Outside the library windows, the moon rose full and bright, casting silver light across the pages scattered around them. Ancient texts and modern plans, genealogy charts and maps of the future they were building together. Lyra looked around at the life she'd stumbled into, the love that had found her, the power she'd learned to embrace, the people who now looked to her for guidance and hope. 3 years ago, she'd been certain she would spend her life hiding in shadows, alone and afraid. Now she sat in a pool of moonlight beside the man who had taught her that being seen wasn't the same as being hunted. That power could heal as well as destroy. That love, real love, didn't diminish in the face of danger or difference or destiny. "I've found my home," she said quietly, and meant it in every possible way. Damon smiled and pulled her closer. "Welcome home, Luna. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. Now tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I love hearing from listeners all around the world. Let's meet in the comments, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free and helps more people hear these stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey with Lyra and Damon. Until next time, may you find the courage to step into your own light.